Hello, everybody. My name is Mr. Amp, and if you're joining me here today, it's because that you've heard that Magnus Carlsen is playing a chess game against the entire world. And what you'll notice, I think, first, if you have a look at this board, is that it's not just a traditional chess game where all the pieces are as you usually see them. It is a Chess 960 game. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Chess 960, it's a game mode. It's a version of chess that was invented by Bobby Fischer. Bobby Fischer, very famous grandmaster back in the day, considered quite possibly the American greatest of all time. Unless you're a Hikaru fan, don't come at me. But what he did was, he was very much against the introduction of computers into the world of chess. He thought it took away from, kind of the creativity of the game. He didn't like the fact that they were adding rigidity and objectivity to it. He thought that the computers were kind of ruining the fun for him, and so he created this version in which the back rank is entirely randomized. You notice the two knights are not meant to be hanging out over here. Same with the bishops. But you will notice that this actually, for a chess 960 position, is pretty simple. Pretty not simple, but pretty usual. It doesn't look too off. If you've played 960 before, you've probably had positions where the king starts, here. You've had, sillier things where, the king might be here with the queen in the corner. The rooks are in the same place, right? This knight and this bishop are actually in their usual place, and the king's only scooted over one. And really, what you've just done is kind of move the king over in place of this knight here, actually, and the same with the bishop. The bishop should be over here as well, and so it's not too dramatic of a change. But what I want to get into really is, considering myself a perfectly average chess player, and I think the majority of the people that will participate in this are also perfectly average chess players. I kind of want to go over what I'm having a look at. This is move zero. I want to determine, what are the possibilities for this starting position with Magnus having white, what he might do, what our responses are to that, coming up with our own potential plans. And so what I'm looking at, I see him here, and what I notice first is that we've got these two bishops here, and, theoretically, if you could develop your bishop into a fianchetto, that's a good move. It's a modernist move. It's part of plenty of openings, like the King's Indian. It's very powerful to fianchetto this bishop, get it on the long diagonal, and make use of, say your opponent does reflects the pawn move, really have a look at this rook here. And so I'm seeing that. I'm also seeing that there's this one here, which you could also put up to double up with the queen if you wanted to. And what that does is that has a look at this pawn, right, which is only defended by the knight and the rook. And so I'm thinking, maybe Magnus does something along the lines of this, and then here, and after a few moves, you've got significant kingside pressure. That's what I see first, and what I think is most likely to happen isn't that, and it's because really you can avoid the battery here with something as simple as a6, right? And what you've done by creating this battery actually is you've blocked your queen in a way, so it's kind of a one move threat that is easily dealt with, right? Having a look here, and from there you've actually sabotaged yourself because you want to develop your queen. You probably want to do it either along this diagonal, maybe somewhere out to here, probably not here, maybe there after you play e4 so you don't block your pawn. But you want to maybe bring it out here, or maybe you kind of want to make it hang around this area. Maybe you want to push this, and then queen here, maybe put your rook there, vice versa here. Whole lot of options there, but I don't think that we're going to see this double bishop thing, at least not off rip, and because it would involve this f pawn being committed so far forward up, kind of once you create this shell structure. After he does this initially, that's really kind of easily dealt with. Say this, move one. Keeping in mind, he's looking for this pawn, which actually has no defenders presently. So he very well may start with this two-move combination, but we could deal with that even if we wanted to with something like c6, right? And we could also just hop in with the knight, Could develop this pawn, maybe even put the bishop there to try and kind of get him to capture. If we put our bishop there, if he captures, right, we develop our knight, and it's actually looking quite nice there. So seeing that initially, that's probably what I would do if I was him, but that's likely not what he's going to do. And I kind of want to just bring this over here to kind of further the point. We go here, here, here. We're like, all right, this pawn's hanging. Don't want to move it, right? Don't want to give a rook away at the beginning of the game. Even something like this is tolerable. Of course, the c pawn here is subject to all of the famous memes regarding the f pawn. You don't want to move your f pawn because it's important for guarding your king. You open up this diagonal, and it blocks your knight from coming out to here, which actually applies if you're playing a regular game of chess and you were white. This is exactly how this would look. Actually, this would just be the f file, and it blocks your knight here, so you don't really want to play that, but it is tolerable according to the computer. But realistically, if we were to transpire like this, then we'd probably run something like this, and we would hope actually that he would take this, so we could take back, develop our knight. We're actually just one move ahead in development. We've gained a tempo through that, but again, not wanting to do that. If we move our bishop here, the computer's gonna encourage him to go knight b3. Okay, knight b3, and I'm assuming that maybe to take the center. Wants us to take here, which I actually don't like, because we're immediately going to have to respond by putting this knight here to kind of, again, guard this pawn, or at least put something in the way of it, right, because the queen's having to look at it. So, ideally, we want him to be the one to capture in this situation. I know we kind of want to bait him into that instead of playing this knight move, but, this is the greatest chess player of all time that we're talking about here. So he's not going to make these common opening mistakes. He's not going to give us these awesome, just theoretical kind of advantages in the opening. He's not going to give us free tempos like that. And so if he goes here, we could recapture, and I'm sure it's plenty comfortable after something like this, and then maybe if we do move the central pawns, because that is a part of chess regardless of what game mode you're playing. Taking the center is definitely good here. You move into some theoretical positions, but what I think is more realistic is he's not going to go for that. I think he's going to go either move one, he's going to go something with his f pawn, because we have the queen and the bishop on that same diagonal, as we would usually see in a regular game when the queen's here and then that here. And in a lot of positions, in a lot of regular chess games, if you play the Caro Kann of Sicilian with this c pawn, you're allowing the queen to come out because the queen would be on this square. But then similarly, if you pick the queen's pawn, Queen's Gambit or something along those lines, with the queen being here and the king being here, you let your queen come out and your bishop come out. So I think he might pursue something like that. Maybe just a calm f3 here. And it is kind of difficult though, because the queen doesn't have any amazing spots along this diagonal. Of course, you don't go here or here, and you don't want to block your e pawn, right? So here and here, if we have a look at those, he doesn't want to land on this spot. He doesn't want to land on c5 because that's just a calm development. And we kick the queen out, and he's losing time there. And if he goes here, again, booted out by the knight. So at a second, really kind of talking about it, kind of analyzing it in the moment, this doesn't actually end up being as good as you might think. Maybe if the queen and the bishop were reversed here, then you'd have some excuse. You put like the bishop maybe like out here and then knight here to cover. Say if we could get this here, and then if we take, then he takes, and he's got a nice knight in the center. That could happen, but that was if these two were exchanged, right? And they're not. And so I think if he wants to pursue this theoretical model of maybe putting the bishop, possibly on this diagonal, he would have to move the e pawn first. I think it'd probably be e4, just a strong controlling move, straightforward theory. From just regular chess. And I think we might want to respond symmetrically. Getting the knights involved earlier is a modern technique, and I notice it's telling me to run f5 here. Kind of playing a silly version of the Sicilian, almost like inverted in a way. If you can see that. And here, he's not going to take back. He doesn't want to take back. But what this does is does what this does for us. What I was saying he might want to do. It basically opens these two diagonals. And then it also, you can strengthen it with either E or G6, and then that allows for the movement of your dark squared bishop. So if you were to take here, we would play, what would we play? I think knight, let's see, yeah, it says knight d6, threatening the pawn. He's doubled his pawns, right? So we're not worried about retaking, as is true with pretty much every opening gambit. You're just looking to deflect pawns, put them in positions they don't want to be in. And then maybe we run either here or here with the queen to kind of have a look at that. Maybe even we give another pawn away to have this, having a look over here. That looks pretty strong to me. I would very much like him to do, or to let us do that, just for the sake of the argument, if we get exactly what we want here. Take here, maybe here, followed by here, and then if he's feeling silly, we win the game. It's Magnus. He's not going to do that, but those are the kinds of things I'm seeing when I'm having a look at this. So definitely a lot of options, a lot of great options. What I would do, isn't what he's going to do. I think it's going to be either of these two pawns to start off with. It just makes the most sense theoretically. Maybe even, hopping the knight out here. It's kind of a move order thing. There's really no functional difference, I don't think. He might think so, and if he thinks so, then he's obviously more right than I am. But when it comes to an opening like this, you're gonna probably transposition pretty consistently, pretty easily, even with it being chess. 960, you're gonna have transposition into, something like this. This would be the, I know this one. Well, it technically could be like considered the Queen's Gambit, or I guess if you want to look at it from the opposite direction, it looks kind of like the Vienna. But it's kind of hard to assign opening names. But if you know openings and you can kind of see, similarities in the structure, then yeah, the opening theory you do know still applies. But again, I'm thinking a little more defensively, of course, because he's got the first move, and kind of I think the last thing we want to do is if he ends up running this right here, which is, there's no problem with that, and maybe if he even full sends what we don't want to do is okay, I guess castling isn't even an option here. That's odd. But we don't essentially want to just have our king, over here with no development over here while he's having a look at us here. Because, if we step into the line of sight of these two bishops, it just doesn't look great. It doesn't look fun. It's a great way to just get yourself in a bad spot. You're kind of preemptively just prescribing your king to a very sad and most often unsuccessful fight if you just step into the sights of these bishops here. So if he does that, I'll be beyond surprised, but I don't think he will. I think he's going to play something, simple and theoretical. Here, I could see here, I could see even here, if here plays a little Spanish, perchance, could do like here, and then even, like here is, it's simple. Apparently we've already got the advantage if we play knight d6, and that does make sense to me, because you can't step in because we push out, and then we could let's have a look. If he steps in, yeah, we're going to push out. It's going to encourage him to take here because he doesn't actually want to lose this pawn if he wants to move the bishop. If he does move in, which is a mistake in and of itself, and then he moves it, say back to here, well, he's just down a pawn, and there's nothing he can really do about that, and our advantage is actually far greater than just one. In this case, because this is a pretty strong knight. This knight can even hop in, have a look at this bishop, although it is covered by the knight, so maybe not that, but it's telling me, if they kick us out here, We go knight c5, having a look at this bishop again, and we're pretty solid. We've got a good space here. We're ready to play d5. So if he does do this, he's got to just move. He's got to move back to here, really. The two best options I could just see here and then here is what I would consider as my two options. If he goes here, take, and he's already doubled up, and we actually have that exact same advantage, numerically speaking, kind of the 1.7 range, even though we're not even up a pawn, and that's just because they're doubled. In this particular case, considering it, because the pawns are doubled, you can kind of consider that it's just irrelevant. It doesn't exist because it's looking like, what, f6, f5? Yeah, f5, and then, we're threatening here, and we're also threatening here. And regardless of which of the two he defends, even if he responds by taking, we could definitely hop in and take this, get a lot more ground in the center, and this pawn, again, when we got into that position, it's deflected, as true of all gambits. We deflected it for a reason. King's looking open, queen could scoot over here, or back here to collect the pawn if he doesn't do anything to cover before we get there. So, yeah, not great looks for him if he does that. And also blocking his pawn here is just suboptimal, even though it is, let's see, not the best move. This is considered the best move, and I guess that's because it forces us to play a sequence of the best moves. So it kind of has the highest expected return. If he takes there, takes here, we've doubled our own pawns, and it actually, you maintain pretty much even. He gives away his advantage here. So, but I don't think a guy like Magnus is going to want to pursue this chain of events and just kind of trade a bishop for a knight for really no reason. So he's not going to make that mistake, definitely. But just to get kind of a feel for it, that's kind of how I would have a look at this position, initially. Because, of course, with non-traditional starts to a chess game, you do want to have a look at it, kind of come up with a plan going into it, and see if that plan can be followed, or if you're going to have to be dynamic and change your strategy as things come. So today is, of course, move 1, and it'll be great to kind of see what he does and see also what everyone else wants to do, which it actually already has begun. So I will get back to y'all with that, but for now, move 0, having an initial look, has concluded. Thank you guys for coming along. I really enjoy going over stuff like this. Have a great rest of y'all's day.